Hi everybody, I'm Nathan Kafka. I'm here to speak to you today about restorative practices in residence life. I'm coming to you from the Spring Valley campus of Colorado Mountain College in Glenwood Springs. As you can see, we have real mountains behind us. And I'd like to speak to you today about the three big ideas for my implementation of restorative practices in residence life. Number one, the implementation of a course that is an orientation college course that is built upon restorative elements. Number two, the elimination of a policy handbook and the implementation of student-selected community-based norms. And number three, about the use of restorative conferencing script redesigned for restorative roommate conflict. And so as we talk about those different issues, they're going to be based upon my experiences in residence life. I've been doing this since 2004, full-time since 2006, working in both high school residence life and in college residence life. It's interesting how certain things have come about in my experiences, but I started using restorative practices back in 2010 in a high school based program that was a traditional residence life based model, full-time live-in staff. And then the colleges that I've worked in have also been both 2-year and 4-year based upon the traditional residence life model, where it's full-time live-in staff as opposed to faculty that would be living in. And so the first idea is based upon what would be a first-year experience course or a college orientation course for some people, and expanding that into a restorative course. And lots of schools have these. They're mandatory at some schools. I know that when I was a freshman, it was mandatory for us. Schools have found that they're beneficial not only in retention, but in student satisfaction and in connectedness to faculty and connectedness to the institution, and so they've become pretty standard. But what I'm looking to do is actually take that course and focus it on restorative elements and restorative techniques. And so the first part of this class is going to be, the very first class of the course is going to be shame, affect, circles, and that will lay the groundwork for the way that we're going to work with students in the residence halls. So this class is going to be just for residence hall students, about living on campus and the way that we conduct ourselves in our halls and with the people in our communities. We've been doing for several years now community circles. More success last year than the year before, and so we're continuing to grow them. We do weekly circles. They're optional, so sometimes we see students, sometimes we don't, depending on what's going on. Midterms tend to be really low, but what it is that we found that there's very little transition or explanation of that process, and so in the rush of moving in and getting started in classes, there's no time to explain that. In the course, we're going to have an hour each week to talk about growth through restorative practices, what they do for us, how they work, and how we implement them. The other issue that we've been seeing is that our RAs don't get much time to practice with restorative practices. We do a quick training in the fall, and then we kind of shove them out into the world and ask them to get this done, and so there's not a lot of practical experience for them. It's a lot of really tight on-the-job learning, and so we are hoping that through working with the course and role modeling those for students throughout the course over the 6 or 7 weeks it'll run, that our RAs will get more experience as well. So the course is going to start off with restorative education, why it's important, what it is, how to work through your emotions and your affect, understand your emotions and your affect to be able to relate it to others. It's going to teach the concepts that we no longer confront without students going with us. And so we used to be very based upon oversight. A student would make a complaint about noise, the RAs would follow up and go to that room, tell the students that they're violating policy, they've impacted others, but we'd never really let them know who they're impacting or what they're doing. And so we're hoping that through this course it's really going to bring home the concept that we implemented last year, that on certain things we no longer confront without the complaining student with us. And so those concepts will come in along with, we'll be developing in further classes and exploring through restorative elements the ideas of Chickering's vectors of development, the W curve of education, which is really a model that talks about cultural adjustment. It was originally designed for study overseas and the adjustment to foreign cultures, knowing that these students are moving away to college. Lots of our students are open enrollment. That means once they apply to the school, they're automatically in, so they're not exactly adjusted to the idea of college or living away from home. those sorts of things. Definitely academic rigor can be a problem with some of our students, and so we're hoping that all of these transitional issues can be discussed within the course. A typical circle scenario for us would look like a little bit of lecture explanation, a video demonstration from me, followed by students breaking off into their circle groups and asking, what did you see, what did you hear, how did you understand it, and then going back through and asking again, what do you understand differently now hearing it from your other peers, hoping that peer explanation can bring a deeper level of understanding for our students that struggle with some of those concepts. But ultimately, the idea that circles and affect theory really inform all the other steps in the process that they're going to be learning about, and making this as much about the individual college experience as it is about getting oriented to the institution, letting students know that we're really going to be helping them develop themselves. So we can say to them, when you approach this situation and you took responsibility for it, where do you think you grew in this area? And when you let your parents or your roommate deal with this issue and you kind of stepped back from it, how do you think that impacted your development here? How do you think that could have helped you grow instead of? And so that's how we're hoping that this course is going to really work for us. The second idea is taking our policy handbook, which I'm the person in charge of revising every year. I have to sit down and look through it and find what our loopholes were, major incidents that we had that couldn't be addressed by our handbook. We also sit down with our students, our Residence Hall Association, and we talk with them every year about things that they would like to see added or adjusted within that handbook. And what we see is every year we add more and more and more to it, more pages, more clauses, more restrictions. And so ideally what I would really like to see is that we would be taking our students in communities, whether it's by the building or by the hall, the wing, whatever the living unit is, and we'd be asking them to build their own community norms and their own standards for addressing those norms when they are impacted. And so we want to take that and we want to move that away from the us versus them to the us with each other sort of approach, and so that students can feel more empowered to address issues, especially since they're the ones choosing what our levels of enforcement will be. And so along with that comes cardinal rules. Every institution has their strongly held beliefs and values. One here at Colorado Mountain College is that we're a dry campus. We're a dry college, actually, in a state that has legalized marijuana. There's no alcohol, marijuana, or any drugs, possession, or use on any of our campuses. So one of our first cardinal rules, of course, would be students are not allowed to possess or use alcohol or other drugs on any of our campuses. Also, we get into the issue of federal legislation, Title IX, the Campus Save Act, Violence Against Women Act, all these very complex federal regulations that are coming down at us. And so cardinal rules really help us address those as well by saying that at no point can you be knowledgeable of harm to self or others, or engage in harm to self or others would be a basic cardinal rule that provides very wide-sweeping implications, whether that be suicidal ideation or whether that be violence through language or violence through action. That cardinal rule would cover basically all of them. And then the other one would be, along with Title IX, is that no sexual activity without consent first. And so cardinal rules can really help us address some of those widespread federal issues without sounding like we're writing 2 or 3 pages that students need to interpret. We're really boiling things down to the basics so that students can understand and implement. The last third big idea that I have is taking our roommate conflict resolution steps and adding a third one to it. What we really want to do is gain significant impact there. Right now we have a mediation step, which is sometimes helpful based upon who is leading it. Lots of times it's a student RA, not a lot of practice. They're just kind of shoved in with a couple of steps about feelings. Unfortunately, that's one of the things that we don't have time to train on a lot. And then the other one is a contract, which is very easily laid out. Each roommate sits down with a contract and fills out the boxes. These are things that I will share. These are things we cannot share. These are times you can have visitors. These are times I do not want to have visitors. And what they really miss is impact upon other. The mediation talks about what we want to do going forward, but our mediation steps don't really address so much as what has happened. And so with the restorative script, I've rewritten it so that it is victimless and offenderless. It's really very neutral in its approach and allows each party to bring up what happened, what were you feeling at the time, our standard responses. And then it also looks at how it affects the friend groups as well. As we know, roommate conflict is also encompassing of everyone that they know. And so as we look at that, it's important to bring a certain amount of resolution to their friend groups as a whole, and so they're all included there as well, with a special step of thought towards prior interactions, taking students back to how they felt about each other before the conflict. And so those three ideas, a restorative education orientation course, community norms, and the restorative conferencing script, are really what I'm looking to implement as three giant ideas for residence life, and I will be starting those in the fall. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll look forward to your questions.